Welcome to Dynasty Mode, the unofficial EA Sports college football video game podcast. My name is Archy Dimitri Ravanos is at an assignment again today. This is big. This is big, what I'm about to talk to you today, because there's been some recent news, scuttlebutt, discussion when it comes to the college football video game. What is it about? Well, it's about everyone getting as much money as possible. Shocking alert! People want more money. And that's what we're going to talk about. And now that affects a potential lawsuit affects whether or not this video game comes out in time, like we were hoping it would be this upcoming month, but a year from now, this upcoming month. That's coming up. Let's first set the groundwork for what happened. Remember, we've talked about on this podcast how this video game has now the NIL perspective a part of it. Right now, Electronic Arts has come up with a method to be able to offer student athletes who are currently technically still required to go to college to be able to get this, to be able to use their name, image, and likeness for the upcoming college football video game. And we also talked about whether or not this would be a big deal if some students would opt in. Some students would care that the amount of money is only roughly around $500 or so just to be a part of the video game, other incentives inside, and not yet discussed for that part. Well, Dimitri and I have both talked about how that's not going to be a big issue as far as the college football video game is concerned. We're not going to see a big boycott of the game. In fact, I think that was our most recent episode. Will players boycott the video game? That's a wild scenario for me because, first of all, it's free money, right? These players don't have to do anything for this money. They literally have to go onto a website at some point. Maybe it's just an email by the time it gets to them, and then click opt in or opt out. But if they want the money, to opt in. Now, recently, we have come to find out that there is more to the discussion than just the opt-in, opt-out. The first thing we should know is that the players don't have the option to do that right now. EA has just figured out a method to be able to do this. So, when it is time to roll that out, there is some kind of skeleton of a system. There is some infrastructure in place to be able to take care of these players if they want to be able to opt in and opt out. Again, the reported price per player somewhere around the $500 neighborhood. Remember, we talked to Matt Brown and Chris Fanini and company said the number that they were hearing is 3 figures and not 4 figures. Well, it turns out about $500 just won't cut it. Brander, who is a company that takes part in all these NILs, in fact, they represent 54 universities, and that's not zero, but that's not half of them, still a lot. It includes places like USC and Kentucky and their collectives that they have filed a restraining order, a temporary restraining order against EA stopping this practice. Essentially, what Brander is mad about is that they haven't been cut in on the pie yet. Right? Their argument is that they, along with other companies that may have been able to do these kind of collectives, they weren't discussed with when it comes to this type of NIL for the video game. That EA just created one, essentially out of whole cloth, and said, all right, well, if you want to do this, here you go. Now, that comes up with a couple of different issues. One, again, it's a lot of people trying to get their piece of the pie. How much should EA be giving, Brander to be able to get to these NIL players who are represented and the collectives that are represented by Brander? That is really for, I think, you to decide. Now, the judges and courts will decide that, but honestly, should Brander have to be negotiating with EA for this amount of money? You would say maybe in good faith to get out in front of this, EA would have tried to contact everyone, but there are literally dozens of these collectives, many dozens, as well as those who are representing the collectives. Remember, the collectives are not with the universities themselves. Kentucky doesn't do a collective, right? Georgia doesn't do a collective. They're not allowed to pay players for their name, image, and likeness like that, right? Not the pay for play. However, boosters can be a part of these collectives, which are organized and run by people outside of the university. So again, you see the very tangled web that college athletics loves to be able to play in because, well, it wouldn't be college athletics if there wasn't a little bit of difficulty to get things done. If there wasn't everybody with their pies in the pod, fingers, peas in the pod. Some of that made sense, some of it didn't. So if everyone wasn't trying to get a nickel out of a gemstone, then what would we be doing in college athletics? So Brander has filed a temporary restraining order, basically saying that this amount of money, not only wasn't negotiated with people like Brander, but that maybe $500 isn't optimal for some of these players. In fact, some of these players may deserve a little bit more. And yeah, that's probably true. I was chief amongst them when we started discussing this idea that I thought a number that was in the three-figure neighborhood was very, very underwhelming when it comes to this college football video game. The amount of money that I personally, Archie Shea, project this video game to be able to make, just on initial sales alone, would more than cover if they doubled that. If they got to the $1,000 or maybe $1,500 piece per player. And again, apparently, we're only doing 75, 85 players. We're not doing everyone that maybe now was not on scholarship. We're capping the number of players that are going to be able to get it per team. That's what we sort of found out also in their interim. This isn't just everyone who's on the practice squad and everyone that earned a scholarship because they did great things for the university for 3 years and they happened to be a scholarship open, so the coach decided to do a really cool drone video or something, a big reveal perhaps to say you're on scholarship too. It's not everybody. Not everybody's getting this amount of money. So while my figures still account for a lot more money to be open for these potential athletes and for their just use of name, image, and likeness, we're still stuck right now as far as the $500 ish is concerned. And still, that's a number that's been reported, but I don't think that's going to be completely the accurate number. But EA has since said that they're willing to work with people like Brander going forward to try to figure out what may be able to work more so for them. That potentially this initial number 500 was an opening salvo. Again, since we have so much time to be able to get to the college football video game. So maybe this is just the beginning of another set of negotiations because Lord knows everything is a negotiation at this point with college football. All you and all me and all everyone paying attention to this podcast, sharing it with their friends, all we want is the college football video game back. That's all we want. That's every single thing that we want. Now, a big question about this is whether or not this college football video game will be delayed because of this, because this temporary restraining order, which EA has already come out and filed a, hey, knock it off restraining order. This particular restraining order would go for as long as the courts need to take for this to be able to be heard. So, essentially, what's been quoted in some of the articles by On3 and The Athletic is that this would, quote, slow things down a bit. Now, let me bring on my my glasses to be able to read this next part on whether or not that would actually happen. No, that will not happen. It will not slow things down. It will not keep the video game from coming out on time. This game is a priority for Electronic Arts. They have been working hard as hell to get this game to come out and to be able to come out at a decent time frame. Another delay would suffocate momentum on it. So what is the other option for Electronic Arts? Well, you already know it before I say it, but I'm going to say it anyway when I put my smart guy glasses on one more time. And it goes like this. No current players in the game. There you go. All right. Now I'm going to take that off. The glasses now go off. Because here's the thing about the college football video game. The game itself, when it comes back out, doesn't have to have the current college football athletes in it. It doesn't. It frankly never has had it before. And this is the first time where it's even a possibility. There is so much excitement, so much fervor, so much clamoring for this video game to be able to come back that it does not matter who is in the video game. I could be a cover athlete for the video game, loosely using the word athlete there, and we're still buying it. You will still buy it. I will still buy it, even if I'm not an option to be played with as a playable character, because this game has been gone for a decade. Okay, we want it back more than anything else. So if we just get the computer generated characters that we've had forever, that's okay. That's okay. There is so much better, or there is so much better AI out there. There's so much more technology out there to be able to create even better looking computer generated characters going forward. That again, even if you are in dynasty mode, and we know the great fallacy of current football players when it comes to dynasty mode, which is that they rotate out fairly quickly when you're playing the game. Even if you're not worried about that aspect and you just want to be able to play a certain legends mode, right? It doesn't mean you can't get the recently graduated ones either. It doesn't mean those who are no longer a part of said NCAA and their universities collectives. If you aren't a Bryce Young recent still playing, Bryce Young could technically still be in the newest video game. If we were sort of a year closer, that gap could be a little bit closer. Doesn't mean that that's not a complete option. I mean, but Barry Sanders, Robert Griffith, they were on the cover video game. What says that they can't be back in the part of the video game itself? You can have the Legends mode and still have semi close to current players. If you wanted to have a Caleb Williams, he's gone this year. You guys have pointed that out in the YouTube comments. Yeah, he's gone this next year. He can be in the next video game. If you wanted to create a smaller Legends mode to launch off of because of a said negotiation that may be going along in the court process between Brander and Electronic Arts. This does nothing to subvert the video game itself coming back. In fact, Electronic Arts has said, no worries, we're coming back. Yeah, because there is a failsafe. The failsafe, which is the entire existence of the game as we've known it. The only new thing that ever existed was NIL. And I tell you this more than I can say anything else about this college football game. If you hear nothing else I've said in any other podcast before, and you hear, I was looking at the time. If you hear nothing else I've ever said about the podcast before, and you hear nothing else I say about the podcast going forward in the future about this video game, if you listen to none of that, just pay attention to this. The reason we lost the video game and the reason we're getting it back are the exact same reason. Name, image, likeness, athlete, player compensation. Period. End of story. The reason we lost the video game is because there was so much uncertainty with how the NCAA was going to handle player compensation, as well as the lawsuits that were out there. We've talked about those in the podcast before. Go back and check out the previous episodes. We have a great history of losing the game podcast out there too. The reason we lost the game is because of all that uncertainty and because the current lawsuits that we're handing down. The SEC, Southeastern Conference, not the Securities and Exchange Commission, the ACC, the Big Ten, they all pulled back their licenses and said, we don't want to allow that because we don't know what this is going to be, and tantamount to possibly having to play players and tantamount to these athletes wanting money for this lawsuit. We don't want to risk any of that anymore. And so they did. And so while the NCAA and while the legal process, including the United States Supreme Court, figured out all of that over an 8-9 year period, then we got the ability to bring the game back. Because at the very beginning, EA said, we want to be able to pay athletes. The NCAA said no. And so they created a game without that anyway. And now that all of that has been cleared up, there is a way to be able to pay athletes. EA Sports will bring back the college football game now that the runway has been cleared. They don't have to wait any longer. The only thing that they still have to figure out is because name, image, and likeness is still fairly new with collectives and these companies that are representing collectives that pay these student athletes for. I guess I don't get to see commercials. I guess I just have to see them, you know, go show up to private signing appearances. Not the fun in that. But while they're still figuring that out, the players still have a chance to be able to get paid. And that's the only thing the EA ever wanted to do with this game anyway, is to be able to cut the players in, because they know and they feel not only it's probably morally right, but also that there's the intrinsic value in being able to have current players, recognizable faces, to be able to sell the video game, talk about the video game, play the video game, be a part of the video game, to represent the video game. So now that's here. And if we have to wait another year, an addition for the players to be able to fully get on board because of that, that's fine. My 100% prediction is that will not take place. The players will be able to be in the next video game because Brander just wants to be cut in. And because they're getting cut in, they're probably going to negotiate for a bigger piece of the pie for the players. So they may make $750 a game, or maybe go up to a cool grand. It's not going to kill EA. It's not going to kill EA. The only thing that's going to kill them is if we saw in the most recent video where players are wanting residuals and they're wanting a piece of the video game. That's no. That's you're not selling this video game. Current players are not selling this video game. The video game existing sells this video game. So players can get some endorsements to be able to make that more popular, to maybe their percentage of the Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I don't know if anybody has Facebook followers, Twitter followers. Maybe that does it for you. But you're not getting back in on this, players. No. Ain't nobody getting the back end. Nobody. No. Tebow wouldn't have even gotten it. Tebow was a big name on the cover, too. He ain't getting back in on that either. All right. That's going to do it for this here podcast. We'll be back next week with another podcast where we'll talk more about the college football video game. Plus, we got a cool guest podcast, too, talking just about this college football video game and whether this person would have taken part of being part of the video game and what they would have negotiated for and wanted to be in the video game. That's coming up. But until next time, bon voyage. You may save us sim to next week, as Dimitri say, but I say adios, amigos.